Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare.
And so I owe a great debt of gratitude to Malati and Shamsundar and Mukunda and Janaki and Gurudas, Yamuna, Tamal Krishna, who was my roommate back then. So my thanks to them. I was asked what verse I would like to lecture on, and because I generally get myself into trouble, I figure I'd pick this one. There are a few issues in our theology that have baffled sages throughout history, and this is one of them. Let's recite the verse together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Yasyaham anugrinami. Harishye taddanam shanai. Tato dhanam chajantyasya. Let me try that one again. Tato dhanam chajantyasya. Svajana dukha dukhitam. Yasyaham anugrinami. Harishye taddanam shanai. Tato dhanam tyajantyasya. Svajana dukha dukhitam. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Yasyaham anugrinami. Dukitam. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Yasyaham anugrinami. Harishe taddanam shanai. Tato dhanam chajantyasya. Svajana dukha dukhitam. Vacha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. The personality of God had said, Yasya, whom, aham, I, anugrinami, favor, padashye, I will take away, tat, his, dhanam, wealth, shanai, gradually, tata, then, adanam, poor, tyajanti, abandon, asya, his, svajana, relatives and friends, dukha dukhitam, who suffers one distress after another. Translation: the personality of Godhead said, if I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. Think about that. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way he suffers one distress after another. It's a long purport, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll read a little bit of it. Devotee Goswami, in Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, his definitive treatise on the process of devotional service, explains how a Vaishnava is relieved of all karmic reactions, including those that have not yet begun to manifest, aprarabdha, those that are just about to manifest, kuta, those that are barely manifesting, bija, and those that have been manifested fully, prarabdha. As a lotus gradually loses its many petals, so a person who takes shelter of devotional service has all his karmic reactions destroyed. So let's start off with some basics. Our theology, the Krishna consciousness, Vedic perspective, says that anything that's alive, anything that we says is living, is a spark of God. It's a spark of eternal, unchanging and inviolable and irreducible spiritual energy. All right, that right there, that's a big encouragement. It means all of us here in this moment right now, we are eternal, beautiful, fully cognizant, complete, blissful entities. We just forgot. And I asked Prabhupada one time if living in the spiritual world is so blissful and it's so great, what happened? Why did we come here? What were we thinking? And he said, well, you can think of it like this. A wealthy person lives in an opulent home and has a wonderful kitchen, a private chef, and every day this wealthy person eats exquisite, rich, tasty foods. And then one day goes to the chef and says, for a change, can you make me some chip rice? Now, chip rice is what it sounds like. It's the broken grains of rice that fall to the bottom of the sack. It costs less to buy. It's a poor person's meal. And Prabhupada's point was that we like variety. We like change, even though sometimes it gets us in trouble. I thought that was a rather brilliant explanation, that, because by nature, consciousness is active. Nobody needs to tell you you're alive. You know you're alive. And as long as you're alive, you're acting, you're doing things. It's a dynamic principle. And we like variety. Some souls choose to move away from that opulence of the eternal realm to experience. The mentality is, I wonder what it's like to live not with God, but like God. So the material world essentially is a playground where souls can act out their fantasies. And it's constructed in such a way that eventually we're going to come to our senses and realize, I'm a fish out of water here. Why is it that I'm trying so hard to be happy? Nothing's working. Nothing's working. That's the moment described in the opening verse, the opening mantra of the Vedanta Sutra, Atata. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now you get it. Ata, now. You understood. Now Brahma Jigyasa. Now inquire after Brahman. So anything that we say lives is this eternal spark of energy covered by forgetfulness. We've been taking birth in this material world for so long, so many lives. Never underestimate how deep our material conditioning runs. Our habits are ingrained from a very, very long time ago. So the basic idea of Krishna consciousness is that our original awareness of ourselves as eternal, fully complete beings can be reawakened by the recitation of God's names. That sound is so powerful that it stimulates sleeping consciousness and revives our awareness of ourselves and our relationship with Krishna, with the divine. So the question comes up, well, I'm trying to be a devotee, I'm trying so hard. Why do things still happen? That my life still is subject to so many compromises and so many disappointments. And I chose to talk about this verse because it plays an important part in the biography that I was very honored to write about Srila Prabhupada. In the days before he came to America, when he was first starting his efforts to prepare to go west, every bad thing imaginable happened to him. And that can get you down. That can really be a cause of real despondence and sadness. And then he found this verse in the Bhagavatam. Krishna says, if I really favor somebody, I make their life totally miserable. So this deserves a little discussion. This deserves a little unpacking here. There was a book that was published back in 1981 by a Rabbi, Harold Kushner. The book was called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Have any of you heard of it? No. See, everyone, yeah, I read that one. Rabbi Kushner addresses the issue of theodicy. Theodicy means, if there is God, why is there also evil? How do these two ideas fit together? Kushner and his wife had the rather tragic experience of seeing their young son Aaron die in 1977 of a disease called progeria. Progeria means premature aging. He was a young boy, 10 years old, and yet they watched him grow to old age. So that by the time he passed away, he looked like an old man, this young child. And it completely turned Kushner's understanding of religion on its head, because he had been brought up in the Jewish tradition to believe that if you live your life according to God's rules, there are certain things that you can expect back. And we would like to believe this. Everyone wants to believe that we live in a world where goodness is rewarded, where proper behavior will lead to a happy outcome. We love happily ever after endings. It's the American disease. And we hold out hopes for that, and we're constantly being disappointed. So Kushner wanted to write a book that essentially would comfort grieving people who are grieving over the sadnesses of the world. So he wrote this book, which asks the same question: Does suffering have meaning? Is there any point to suffering in the world? And he goes through a number of different kinds of responses and basically pokes holes in them all. All right, one answer would be, well, bad things happen because we're here to learn something. All right, you learn by going through the hard times. To which Kushner replied, all right, tell that to a young child like my son who dies at age 10. What is he supposed to learn from that? Ask victims of abuse. Right? So have you learned something from this? What kind of idiotic question? Then the argument is, well, God only chooses to visit hard times on the strong. God wouldn't be giving you these burdens if he didn't know that you had the strength to get through it. Yeah. Okay. What's the general response to that one? All right, tell you what, got an idea. Make me weak and spare me the effort. Kushner rejects the idea of misery or evil as being the result of karma, because he says we can't see it. There may be previous lives, maybe we're suffering from something we did in the past, but how will we know? We'll never be able to see that, so he rejects that. So ultimately, for him, it came down to either God is all good, and he is not all powerful, or God is all powerful, but he's not all good. And he couldn't bear that idea. He couldn't bear the idea that God was not all good. So he opted for the notion that we have to carve out some part of creation where evil exists separate and apart from God. That God is all good, but there are some circumstances that he just can't control. That was his way of explaining this. And the question, therefore, for him was not, why has this happened to me? But now this has happened to me, what do I do about it? Which is a legitimate position to take. But the idea that some things in creation are outside of God's control is inconsistent, at least from the Vedic point of view. In fact, if you think about it, what he just did was to create an absolutely perfect argument for atheism. It's the same conclusion as science. That there are things happening that have no moral or rational justification. It's an incomplete, chaotic universe, and therefore we have to accept that there is no intelligence behind it. In fact, the deeper down you go into your insight into matter on the subatomic level, the more incoherent and the more indefinite and chaotic things appear. So the conclusion is the same, that something exists separate and apart from God, therefore why even bother inventing God in the first place? There are things outside his control. We don't need God. It doesn't explain anything. So, myself, I'm a pragmatist. In the devotee community, I think that a lot of suffering can be alleviated if we just organized better. If we got to understand one another, if we became a little more sensitive to one another's needs, I think a lot of that kind of distress could be avoided. I know from our experience in the first generation, those of us who were privileged to know Srila Prabhupada and grow up in those early days, there weren't those kinds of mechanisms in place. There wasn't much pastoral care going on. It was all emergency work. We were out there doing anything to please Prabhupada. That was basically our motive in life. If it pleased him, we were ready to do it, whatever it was. And that's one big difference between the first generation and the future generations. We literally put our lives on the line. That's something that, thankfully, most of you will not have to do. You won't have to go through quite the same kind of extreme conditions. There'll be sacrifices to be made. We talked about that yesterday. But I think that if we were to organize better and understand one another better, some of this confusion about why is it that I'm trying to be a devotee but my life is so messed up would go away. There was a morning walk in Los Angeles when Karandar, one of the early devotees, and who at the time was head of the publishing office there, asked Prabhupada, he said, before I was a devotee, my life was so organized. I had my act together. And since becoming a devotee, everything is upside down. Everything is crazy. And Prabhupada's answer to him was always very good. He said, well, think of it like cleaning your room. When you first start to clean your room, the furniture's out of place, there's dust flying everywhere, and it looks totally crazy. But by this cleansing process, your room will be better than it has ever been. It's a little bit like that. We're cleansing our hearts, so a lot of stuff's going to come out. I lived in temples for 13 years. And so coming out of temple life in October 28th, 1982, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember it well. for reasons that we're not going to get into here. I got on a plane in Paris and came back to New York, where I'm from, and immediately looked for a psychiatrist. And thank goodness I found a good one. Her name was Martha Friedman. She's passed away now. I don't think it was because of me. Martha wrote a small book that you might be interested in called Overcoming the Fear of Success. Now that sounds counterintuitive. People say, well, no one's afraid of success. People are afraid of failing. One of Martha was a shrink to the celebrities. She had a lot of big names in her Rolodex. And one very famous songwriter was a client of hers, and so she invited him to address her students at Columbia. She taught psychology at Columbia University. And so this fellow went up and he kind of surprised Martha by doing a little turnaround. He said, "Don't believe what she tells you about fear of success. I'm a huge success and I love it." So one very insightful young lady in the room raised her hand and said, "Did you always want to be a songwriter?" And he said, "Well, no, actually, when I was younger, I wanted to be a pianist. I wanted to play piano." She said, "Well, why didn't you do that?" And he said, "Well, I came from a poor family, and there was just more money for me to be able to bring home to my parents by writing songs." So the young lady says, "But now you're a big success. Why don't you go back and do what you want to do?" And he said, "I've tried that, but it's a funny thing. Whenever I've tried to go back to just playing piano, somehow I burn my fingers." This is called self-sabotaging behavior, right? In his mind, he's thinking, if I were to go back, and this is all happening on an unconscious level, if I go back and do what I want to do, it means that I'm going to deprive my parents of food. And so he was unable to do that because deeply embedded in memory was this experience of feeling that he would be betraying his parents by doing what he wanted to do. She talked to me about another client of hers, a woman who went back to school to finish her college degree and found that she could never do it. She could never finish her college degree. And in the therapy sessions, what emerged was that she grew up the oldest of two sisters, and her parents, God bless them, were in the habit of, where the older daughter was always the good student and the young sister was never a very good student. So the parents in front of the children would be saying things like, "Well, at least one of our daughters came out okay." So buried in her unconscious mind was this notion that me doing well in school means that my younger sister gets insulted, put down, her life is compromised. So she could never finish her college degree because she was carrying that sense of guilt in her. I think you're beginning to get the idea here. She talked about another client whose parents were always fighting when she was a child, and the child sees the parents fighting, worried my parents are going to get divorced and I'm going to be abandoned. Right? So the young girl pretended to have reading difficulties. She didn't have any reading difficulties, but she pretended to have reading. Why? Because then the teacher calls the parents, and the parents have to stop fighting and give their failing child their attention. Right? So sometimes, if you're not getting what you want by doing good, you fail. Maybe not consciously, but you fail in order to get that. Right? Or let's say you have a father who is unresponsive to you. You come home with an A paper from school, or you do something wonderful in gymnastics or whatever, and your father's indifferent, doesn't know how to offer praise, doesn't know how to offer encouragement, doesn't know how to say what a wonderful job you did. So if you're not getting that attention and love by doing good, by doing well, you mess up. And maybe that behavior will even carry over into adult life. Right? I don't deserve a good partner. I don't deserve a good partner. Or they call me, this is, I don't know about you, but I get this I feel this all the time. They think I'm such a good devotee, you know. I wrote this biography, I'm up here giving class. If they really knew me, if they really knew where I was coming from, and if they knew all of my failings and shortcomings, they wouldn't have such a nice opinion of me. So you can all plug your own stories into this situation. So what do we do with that? Well, this verse from Bhagavatam is an indication. It's a help. There's something deeper going on. When you're feeling despondent, when you're down and out, when you hit the bottom, right? We're very fortunate in Krishna consciousness. We've been given extraordinary tools with which to go deeper inside the experiences of our life and understand that there's something miraculous happening inside each of these moments. You might call them hidden dimensions of reality. My brother Brian is a physicist, and he's a pretty good one. And he talks about hidden dimensions of reality, and he gives an example. It's a very helpful example. If you think of an ant walking along a line, the ant really only has two options, right? Forward and backward, because that's a line is a two-dimensional environment. What if you go up closer and you realize that instead of a line, what you have is a length of garden hose? Now the ant has options. The ant can go around the hose in this direction, it can go around the hose in the other direction. If you drill a hole into that length of garden hose, the ant can go inside, and there are other dimensions and options in there. But we can't see those dimensions because they're tiny. They're rolled up on a dimension that we're unable to perceive. So even in physics, there's an acknowledgement that there are mysteries, hidden dimensions to reality that we just are incapable of perceiving. Well, the same is true in the Vedic view of reality. There are things going on that we just can't perceive. They're happening on levels that our blunt senses and intellect are unable to comprehend. However, we can get a sense of them through sincere chanting, through devotional service. By living a devotional life, those hidden dimensions become revealed to us. We may not be able to see them by our own material effort, but by becoming qualified to receive an understanding, a vision of those different dimensions, they can be revealed. And that's the process of Krishna consciousness, is seeing deeper into reality through preparing ourselves to be qualified to see those deeper dimensions of reality. So it's a change of our internal story, if you will. Let me give you a practical example. If you have a soldier who's wounded in battle, lying on the battlefield, and the soldier is thinking, well, I'm not dead, that's good. I'm going to go home, I'm going to be received like a hero, that's good. They'll probably put me in a hospital somewhere to recover, and maybe I'll meet some cute young nurse, that's good. And I don't have to fight anymore, that's good. So if the medics come along and say, hey pal, do you need any morphine? The soldier might say, you know what, I'm okay. Give it to somebody else who needs it more than I do. Take the situation on the other side. Someone, let's say, shot in a food store holdup. The food store owner is lying on the ground thinking, my insurance isn't going to cover this. I don't know if I'm going to survive. What's going to happen to my business? I can't afford extra help. My family's going to suffer. So when the medics show up and say, hey guy, do you need some morphine? He might say, doc, give me all you got. I'm really suffering. Same situation. But the processing of that experience is vastly different according to the internal story that the individual is telling himself. Krishna consciousness is the original internal story. Krishna consciousness is the core self emerging in all of its glory, that we cannot be compromised. You are not the sum total of all the traumas of your life. Just erase that misunderstanding from your thinking. We have traumas, we go through traumas. They do not define us. They cannot define us. We are not compromised by the circumstances of our life. So it's a glorious thing. And so I thought that would be an important verse for us to talk about a little.